Hello, welcome to this week's edition of the Turning Points podcast. Today we had an amazing time talking to Kendall Warson. Kendall is the second niece of Colleen Brophy, who, of course, is one of the founders of Ivy House, where Corinne is at. We had an amazing time talking about Kendall's fairly new experience in the spiritual seeking landscape, I suppose. 18 months in, and man, she just cut right into it, didn't she?
She's completely transformed, and she's our youngest guest yet on Turning Points podcast. And she was very candid, and it has been a massive transformation for her. So I'm just really excited for everybody to listen, but also for younger people in their 20s, to take a listen, to connect with somebody who has had challenges and who is really peaceful and expansive now on her journey. So take a listen.
Absolutely. Enjoy. Hey, Kendall, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you, man. We had your cousin, the Aaron. I guess that was the second or third podcast that we did. So I guess we're, trying to get everybody from Colleen. So Colleen from Ivy House is your aunt, that's correct, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. She's been an amazing guide in my life.
Oh, perfect. Well, I can't wait to get into that. So I'm going to start with the question that we ask all the guests. And the question is, many seekers can recall that point in time when they started to question the so-called reality they were taught, that turning point of conditioned beliefs. What was the thought or feeling you had when your childhood programming no longer worked for you?
Yeah. So to tell the story in full, when I was younger, I grew up in an achievement-oriented atmosphere. We're a big family of doers, a lot of doers. And I was accustomed to this idea of manifestation. I had this, this plan that I would do. I would write these life maps where I would say, I'm going to go to NYU, and then we go to Parsons, then I'm going to go work at Marc Jacobs, and I'm going to work at Diane von Furstenberg, and then I'm going to be a creative director. And 12 years old, mapping stuff out. And it was this plan that I had, and I thought that, when I would get there, that's when I would be happy. And I think that's what happens. You get this programming going around tunnel vision and being on autopilot. And so went through my youth kind of on this track, and no one in my family identifies as being creative. And so I had this big battle with my creative identity and didn't necessarily feel super comfortable or confident in my own creative skin. I was always kind of supplementing my passions. I remember people would be like, "What's your favorite class in school?" And I'd be like, "Photography." And like, well, never what's the real favorite class in school? And it's just, I always had this pull, but I was fighting it in a lot of ways, in part because I was just not confident, and I didn't really feel like I was moving from a place of, authenticity from my heart. It was more just like programming in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up going to RISD for a summer program when I was 16, and I had to make a PowerPoint to convince my parents to let me go. And that was the moment where I knew I had that I found my tribe, and I was like, okay, I'm kind of reaffirming again that I'm very creative, and I started to feel the flow state and, these moments of euphoria. But then I go back to everyday life, and it was like I was just struggling and going uphill. And at a certain point, when I hit the end of my life map that I had made when I was 12, I was a creative director, and I was traveling all over the United States building these immersive art shows that went from city to city. And we had this big warehouse in Arizona that was just the ugliest thing I've ever seen. It was just really dark. There wasn't any natural light, but it was cheap. And so we'd have the artists fly in there, and I would do everything. I was curating, I was working with them with the production team, I was taking them out to dinner, and working with these two former Marines who had this grit and this, energy around and this belief system that happiness can't equate with ease, or that success and ease are not in sync with one another. And at the time, I obviously identified with that too, because I was part of that whole ecosystem. And was in the warehouse one day, and I saw this dog get hit by a car, and I went to go save the dog, and I watched the life move out of it. It was really tragic. And then my friend called me, and her boyfriend had just had a heart attack from working really hard in investment banking. And I was sitting in the parking lot kind of overwhelmed, and I saw this homeless guy who seemed to be on drugs, who was going through the dumpster and pulling out all these clothes that I had designed for Wonder Spaces for the company I was working on. And he was wearing it, and he's biking around, and I was just like, okay, so, what is happening today? This feels like I'm in this big joke of life. And it was like this irony of seeing the clothes that, I had obsessed over creating, just being almost like mocked, and like ran away with. And so that's when I knew I had to get out of that situation and quit, because I was just so unhappy, and it was really dark. I felt sad all the time. But I'd still gotten to the end of this life map, and so I was confused. Like, it didn't equate, because I was like, I thought that this was going to lead to joy and lead to me feeling better and at ease with myself. And then quitting was really challenging, because I knew that I was fighting against my ego. I that was the title that I wanted, and that was the role that I thought would make me who I wanted to be. And so when I was trying to tell my boss that I'm quitting, and he's like, this job is perfect for you. This is who you are. And I just remember saying, I'm resolved, I need to leave. I'm resolved, I need to leave. And then just having a full-blown breakdown of panic attack. And, it was some type of parking lot. It was just shaking and sneezing and just regurgitating all these emotions that I had around my identity and my ego. And then I didn't know what to do. But that was really when the tables turned for me, and I knew I had to, get off autopilot, and I had to figure out how to really create a relationship with myself, and not put myself through this torturous day to day that I was subjecting myself to. And then called Colleen Keener and went to Nashville. She left her camper van in the airport parking lot. I just jumped in it and then drove to the Wellbeing Retreat Center with Dawn and Patty, who I know you've also spoken to. And that the first day, I get there, I was like, so what do I have to do here, to be here, and how many hours do I have to work? And Dawn and Patty, they're really patient. They're just kind of looking at me and like, well, whatever you feel comfortable with, and then by day 3, I'm still kind of bullish about trying to find stuff to do. And they're like, why don't you just not do anything? And that was the first time in my life that anyone's ever said that, And so I just sat with myself for 5 days and really unplugged and started to that's when all the conditioning was illuminating, and I was starting to see why I was doing so much. And I would have these moments of awe and where I would be angry at my parents, for forcing me to be this doer. And I never knew how to be. And then I'd realize that they were the people that wanted me to be able to be. And so they were trying to give me the doing so that I could make space in my life to be happy. And so it's all the dots started to connect, and I started to see this compassionate intention behind everything in my life. And all the anger wafted out, and I could see these things, move out of me. And I had the same thing with my body, where I hadn't connected with my body in so long. And I went through this tumultuous eating disorder and had a lot of weird sexual interactions with guys that I just buried so deep. And then I was there, and I was just, in the trees, and it's just holding myself and just reconnecting and seeing that I was making the world around me. And that's when it just kind of started to click, and was able to pick up a lot of like literature and learnings about this idea of what it means to be a seeker, and helping to explain what I was going through, and being able to talk to Don and Patty about, every day I would come up and I was like, something new happened. I hit another milestone. And it was just this unpacking of who I was, and what my identity was. And then I got back in my car and I went back to Los Angeles. And that was when I hit the dark night of the soul, so to speak, where everything that I had attributed meaning to was just, I didn't feel anything. I'd be in like a bar with my friends, like, what are we all doing? And I was just looking at my clothes, or I was looking at the makeup I used to wear. And I was like, what on earth? What was happening? What is happening now? And what is meaningful, and like, should I be here anymore now that I'm beyond that like egoic Kendall persona that I had crafted, and it doesn't mean anything. So what is left? And I started working with a teacher who works a lot with joy. And I was like, okay, I'm going through this whole death sensation, and I probably could work with a little joy, So I started to work with him and understand more about journeying inward, and then it started to reverse, where I had hit such a low point where I really didn't feel like I wanted to live, or I would live, but not even from a suicidal perspective, but just like the sensation of death, and that all around me. And then it started to shift again when started to learn how to be present and live. And then everything just started flowing. And I was like, no, it's on this whole new track where it's like I shot out of the belly of the whale, and now I'm in this kind of mythical, funny stage or something where I'm still Kendall in some way, but it's just every day I feel like this sensation of joy and fearlessness and, compassion. And so it's been a really fast, like, I don't know, 18 months or something between all these different experiences. And it's really hard to explain to people, and I haven't talked to anyone about it besides really Corinne and Colleen. But it's been something that I'm really grateful for, to have had that point where, I did hit that, I don't know, the end of my map, so to speak, and go through that darkness to see really what was just not true, and what I had attributed, meaning to in a way that wasn't serving me. So that's my little journey.
Man, and that was 18 months ago that kind of kicked off?
I think so. Yeah, August 2019. And then, the funny thing with COVID and the timing of how that happened, and it was perfect for me, because I was on this journey of going inward and just starting to see all of these social situations that we put ourselves in day-to-day life, and at least that I was putting myself into, and I didn't necessarily feel the same connection to all of those people or all of those settings that I had. And then I was starting to ask, how can I actually build a community of people and relationships that serve me and that I feel at home with and I can grow with. And that's why COVID has been like a blessing in terms of the timing for me, because I've been able to cultivate a lot of those relationships and have those types of deep explorations with people along the way.
I mean, because you're in the middle of it, and because I'm a lot older than you, like, do you realize, like, to get that when you're that age? Because most people reach the end of their map when they're 60, and then they realize it hasn't given them what they thought. So for you at age
25.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, part of it is it's this compassion that I have for my parents and the way I was raised and loved. And again, I thought it was always this thing that, was negative and that I was being pushed too hard, or that like life was coming at me, right? Or like I was always moving against this wave. And it made me really strong. It gave me this ferocious, like rigorous grit where I was like, I need to get through things. And so then when I started to understand this whole path of being a seeker, I was like, oh, well, I'm going to go fast. I want to like get in there and see how deep I can go. And it's radically transformed the way I feel every single second of every day, which is amazing.
So these emotions that you're describing, the compassion, the joy, self-love, all those things you're describing, do you feel like you didn't have that 5 years ago?
I would describe the 5 years ago self as one who was self-destructive and very disconnected between, body, mind. I feel like, again, I hadn't seen a tree my whole life. Like now I'm just looking at all these trees, these birds, and just kind of, in awe. But before that, I was just, my head was down, and I had a really bad relationship with my body, and I was just always fairly anxious. I would drink a lot and push myself in social situations to just feel things, and I felt like I was always very numb, and that I never really had as much of a heart as a lot of people around me, which was hard because I think especially as like a young woman, you want to be tough and you don't want to be weak, so to speak, but you're a woman, and there's this idea that you should have softness and a warmth. And I just was really almost like angry, or like it was just a perpetual angst, which was illuminating.
Well, and that's a really good point, because watching, I think women who are successful in business these days almost have to be overly aggressive to almost because you have to fight for this preconceived notion of what it's like to be in that successful business setting anyways, instead of saying maybe this isn't the right way to be in all business settings at this top. And I feel like what you're describing, I wonder if it wasn't your own perspective, or it wasn't your own doing, but it was more of an expectation from, if you're going to be a successful businesswoman, this is what you have to do. And you have to go so far to the extreme that you almost create something that really isn't who you are. And now you're not bringing those nurturing elements into your own life and into your own, interactions. What do you feel? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that was something I started to have awareness around, was when I, would block. It's kind of like a faucet or something. Like when you turn off the sink, you can't like turn off the sink in one part and then keep it running in another part. You can't give yourself a nurturing energy and typically have the same ability to shut that off with other people. Like there's so much synchronicity with the different emotions that we have. And I think I was always trying to bucket things so that way I could protect myself, or to your point, fulfill this like map that was, I don't know where it came from, but it didn't serve me at all. And I felt like when I was in those situations, especially because I had to sort of defend my creativity or legitimize it in a way with people that were very skeptical and dubious of the fact that it could be something that you could actually devote your life to. I was very rigid about proving to other people that this can work and this can be real. But in the back of my mind, I didn't even know if it could be real, and I believed them like entirely. And so I was trying to project that I didn't, and trying to project that, I don't know, I was somehow beyond it, but I never really was until I let it go. And then, but it's hard, it's tricky to deal with people's expectations of you. And and then the expectations get cemented into the belief system that you start to emanate, and you just become like your own worst enemy every day. And it's really sad, I think, that how the majority of people are operating from that space of just not believing in themselves, or holding themselves back from just letting their potential in their, I don't know, individuality shine through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your true self, your individual true self, not the one, because that's, we're born this clean slate as babies, and we're influenced. We learn everything by the people that are around us, but, and if we're around our parents a lot, which typically we are, we're going to learn everything, that they do. And that's, we just are programmed. And then we find out after in our 20s, hopefully, through pain and prodding different, we start to find out, okay, what do I believe about this? What do I think about this? Is this what my parents believed, or is this, and you start to question it. And, I loved your explanation. Thank you for being so open about it, because I think it's such an important topic. Your body will talk to you, your anxiety, like all these young people right now have so much anxiety and pressure, and it shows up in skin conditions and and different illnesses, and it's really because they're not in touch with their true nature, their individual soul's expression in the world, because and it's not our parents' fault. Like it's the culture, our society has these boxes. Well, if you want to go into business, then you do this, and if you want to, even if you want to be an artist, this is what you do. That even has a box, right? And I feel like there's so, I had that happen to me as a musician. Well, if you want to be a musician, you got to move to LA, New York, or Nashville. And I picked Nashville because I felt like it was easier than LA and New York. That's how I got here originally. It's like, oh, New York and LA are too scary for this little Canadian. And that's how it happened. And then, but there's so many that if you really truly, when you know yourself and you can express that individual true nature within yourself, then you can, then there's like it's wide open for you, because you don't have to follow down this narrow, there's like, how many records that are released every week. I know music more than anything, but same with fashion, how many things are released, what are the chances? But if you figure out, and which brings me to the next point, your unique niche, which is your company you're working on now. How did that, do you want to share with that, like that inspiration probably came from that space, do you think? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. Like I still I keep saying awe, but I don't know how else to describe it, where it was like the minute I really just surrendered and I was like letting go, it's like I woke up the next day and I just started to get new ideas, and it felt so organic, and it was just so synchronous. There's a lot of synchronicity in how everything was birthed in the beginning. And I was working on another project that I knew didn't really feel right. And that's something else I started to do with Ravi, is learning how to listen through different parts of your body. So I would intentionally, in meetings even, or just at dinner, like drop in, okay, like, what do I want to order for food? Just like a whole different way of asking myself questions. And then I was so happy whenever I'd like get what or in these meetings, I could just start to understand what people were actually saying or afraid of, or XYZ. And so when I met this woman, Shaiveen, she's a gallerist in Vietnam, and she works with all of these collectors, and she's an art dealer. And I've been working with all these artists as a curator and artist manager. And so we came from two separate sides of this really, horribly structured art world that's just dominated by intermediaries, and the artists and the buyers don't have a relationship today, because the intermediaries are controlling everything, including the selling, and art has become such an asset, and it's not really what the essence of art is about. And so when I was at Wonder Spaces, I was able to connect with artists, and then I felt this deeper connection to their work, and, which is what happens. It's like the transitive property. Like if you love someone, you're going to love what they make you for dinner, or if you love someone, you probably are going to love their clothes more. And if you love an artist, then you're so much more excited to talk about their piece, because there's a story, and how they made it, and there's some personal connection that you have to it that drew you to the work. So those were the things that we were talking about at the beginning with Shaiveen. And then we started talking to people and just interviewing people. And again, that's when the deep listening really came in handy, because we just started to map out all of these commonalities between the two parties who just simply need to have a conversation with each other, and in the same way that we all need to have a conversation with our bodies, or we need to be with the trees. There's just this element of presence and connection that's it's magical, like that is truly what gives, I don't know, life any color or meaning. And so that's what we're focused on now, is creating relationships with them directly and enabling them to talk and share stories about what they're making or why they're buying what they're buying, and just hopefully creating more meaning in that space and more equality and access, more democratization, trying to deopacify the whole system a little bit. And it's like every day someone calls me and is like, oh, I want to invest. Or every day someone calls me and is like, oh, I want to help you, or we need a CTO. And then CTO just emails me, it's just working at this pace that's really incredible. And we're so grateful to kind of like do it as an act of service in a sense. Like it feels like the fight, so to speak, or like the doing that I feel drawn to right now. And so I was kind of grappling that with it for a little bit. It's like, what is my relationship with the doing versus the being? And can I do it all? Like, what is the space for doing? And is that going to take over the being? And I was, again, putting into buckets, into these big compartments. And then I realized that there are no compartments. And that's actually one thing Dawn said once, where it's like you're in a cyclone and the doing is moving around and the being is at the center. But it's all the same thing, there's no duality there. So I've started to feel a lot of synchronicity and flow in between those two phases between the doing and the being, I guess, through this project, which I feel like is very important and great work to be able to work on.
Oh, that's so beautiful, girl. I'm so excited for you. And as you're saying this, I'm like, as a musician, I'm like, how could you do this with music? And then I went to films. Not that I wasn't fully present. I was listening to everything. I was thinking, I think they're doing that in film actually, where they have all these, there's a company that has these filmmakers and then they have the audiences that support. You figure out which film you want to support. And so they're making independent films that way. So gosh, how beautiful that is for you. And your business partner name is Shailene, is it? Shaiveen. And is she in Vietnam as you guys are working together creating this?
Yeah, which is also awesome and incredible. And every time that we're Zooming and building this company, and she's halfway around the world, and it's incredible. And so I think after COVID, I'll probably go to Vietnam for a little bit. But it's such a gift to be able to connect with people from different cultures and to share an experience of making something with someone that comes from a different background or a whole different place in the world. And it just feels very expansive because we're able to truly connect and collaborate and flow together, even though it's all through Zoom, which is just it's so cool. I mean, it's amazing.
Sean, we must have picked up on Kendall's vibe before the call, because we've decided a couple of weeks ago to do Facebook Live for 20 or 30 minutes before we do our interview every day, not necessarily about the person coming on, but usually about the person I've just posted, because we're kind of 2 weeks behind and to give us a little leeway. But the topic today was, listen to this, discerning between doing what you're guided to do versus what your inner programming says you should do.
Very interesting. That's like a good synopsis of exactly what I've dealt with in my life.
Right. When you were talking about doing versus being, I was like, that's it. Because we were talking about like being in the flow. What does it mean to be in the flow? How do you know when you're in the flow? And I loved how you were describing, even just when you sit down for a meal, listening to your body, which is something we talked about on the Facebook Live too, just an hour ago. And then when you learn to do it with simple things, like listening to your body and listening for a meal, then you can do it with, and when you do it every day, then it becomes more natural, what you want to shop, and then who to call, and how to spend your day. And then you have creating space to have this idea to start your own company.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I think part of what helps differentiate the two themes that you're referencing for me is just been that I knew what it felt like to move from the should, right? Or to be moving from a place of I don't know, of trying to prove something or doing something for someone else, and not necessarily not coming from your heart. That's the best way I could describe it. Like I feel as though I had never really just organically spoken, or I never just let my heart speak through my mouth. And then now when I do, it's just so much easier. I'm like, oh man, I just don't really need to have this anxiety around what's going to happen, because you're just there. It's just happening. And to not be obsessed about the future and to not be obsessed about the past and to let that go, I think is also a really big milestone. It has been a big milestone for me too, especially from this context of like achievement or doing, because that typically is, you're always thinking about, where you're going, and you're never really just in the moment and in presence.
Yeah, and you had said earlier about that map that you created, that map that was your life, and it embodied success, and that it didn't serve you, and I think it's interesting because I've had similar experiences with that, where I've gone into a project, I've gone into a career where not only am I going to do this, but this is how it's going to unfold, and this is the bar, and I will only be successful as long as it fits into the box of that, my version of success. And I think an interesting thing that came to mind is that I don't think all of that process that you were in isn't you. You talk about the way you go through business, and not have the same thing where you got this bucket and you got this bucket. And I think we oftentimes want to abandon all of the things from our past instead of just the things that didn't serve us, and I struggled a lot with that for about a year and a half after leaving a 10-year project with, all right, everything about that. I'm quitting that whole industry. I'm letting go of all that stuff. And, what's interesting is when you talk about Don saying that there's a doing and a being, you were doing. There was a lot of things that you were doing, but I'm curious if some of your nature was also doing. You were doing all of that without being as well. And I'm curious if you're going to discover some of the nature that was happening in that doing process will carry over. And I don't know that it's about not doing any of those things that worked and served in that map, but more or less that beingness into the doing now and marrying those things together.
Yeah, I completely resonate with that. I think that also the notion of trying to abandon things or feeling like you're fleeing. It was one moment when I just saw that we were like all on these, horizontal ladders or something in these work systems, and everyone thinks that they're climbing up, but they're just like climbing around, and this whole idea of moving in cycles and circles has also been very thematic for me, where I feel like I will have someone that taught me something, like my boss in my last company was a great example of someone that was a personality that put me through a lot of growth. And then I was start to talk to other people that I was going to maybe work for. And then it was like, I would see him as like, as that person. And I would start to realize that sometimes things just recur until you have awareness around what it was or something. And so then I was like, okay, now I have to really pay tension, but when I was, trying to figure out, and it's still kind of in this circle, but like, where am I supposed to go? And there is no answer to the question. It's like, you're just wherever you are, and your home can be wherever you are, and so I think that's something that I physically have been moving around a lot, or I think I can't be in LA anymore because that's where I had this old identity, and it just, and that discomfort is really toxic, and it doesn't solve anything. It just adds a little more cloudiness, I think, or it has added more cloudiness for me, as opposed to just sitting with it and letting it be, and deciding whether or not it feels like the place or the the band or the meal that you want to be around anymore, and then just to feel what's calling you next, as opposed to trying to shut the door on something, because there is no door, and it's just, it doesn't serve, it hasn't served me at least to do that. So, but the discomfort with growth, I think it's an interesting instinct that sometimes comes up that we all have to deal with and learn from.
Sitting with it. I mean, that's so beautiful that you're learning to just sit with whatever comes up. Just sit with it. And that can teach you so much, because I feel like if one of the best things that COVID has done for so many people is they have to sit in it right now. Whatever it is a variety of different challenges that people have. And if nothing else, the distraction of being so busy and having so much to do all the time, and places to go and meals to eat out, and being so busy and distracted to be able to sit and process the things that come at us on a daily basis, whatever that is. So I love that's what you're experiencing and doing naturally. And
and I think it's been a lot of I love the term space making and making space, because I'm so visual, and so having that vision of giving myself space and of making space for other people, and I've had that moment where I have been very present with someone else and felt as though the space that we've made together, like I know what they're feeling, and I know what they're thinking, and it's like this crazy human connection capacity that we have to, on the minute you feel like you're God, or you feel like that person's God, and you're God in quotes, whatever. But it's just this like crazy sensation where you just feel so connected to each other, and that's sort of what I'm starting to experience with trees, and starting to experience with like everything in the world, and it's really magical, but it's super important to have that notion of space, and to also receive, and to make space for people to be received, and that's a gift, I think, that I'm learning, and especially with friends and with family, and just it also helps when you're not locked in your own narrative, and you're not like in your own story over and over again, and you're actually listening and able to pay attention. Just more space and more capacity. So that's something that I'm continually working to make sure I'm aware of and active towards, because it can go away quickly, if you get caught up in the flywheels and stuff, everything. So it's something that's definitely a daily practice.
Yeah, and that's what I think is why meditation is such a great tool, is because a meditation practice, it brings you into the awareness of that space, right? So you start with, okay, there is space, and then as you keep bringing yourself back to that space gets a little bit bigger, and that space gets a little bit bigger, and then your awareness of that space gets even bigger, and it kind of just expands outwards. And that was one of the things with the podcast was, having a space to talk about the process and maybe the messy parts of the process, or the processes, the part of the process that is scary, or, just being honest about, meditation and maintaining that practice is incredibly hard. Having awareness, inviting awareness into my internal world is hard, much less than bringing that awareness out into, the full world. These are very difficult things to do because you're constantly met with your own programming that wants to shut down that awareness or distract that awareness. And then you're constantly running into people that are also trying to do the same thing, maybe out of fear, maybe out of complete oblivion. Maybe they have no idea they're doing it, but awareness looks funny to people that don't invite that awareness into their life. And I think it freaks people out because that you don't know what to do with it because it's not part of the programming. It's not, and you never expect it. You don't really expect that awareness to show up because, like, no, this wasn't what I projected was going to happen. And so it is jarring and it's shocking to invite awareness out. And so, anyways, that it sounds like you had an amazing experience of being able to take time and be with that relationship with that newfound space, that newfound awareness. And now you're bringing that space and that awareness into, a new business endeavor that is similar to what you were doing, but a completely different arena, a completely different space. And, I think that's beautiful. And I think that's the challenge, is to bring that awareness into your everyday life.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think I was kind of at some points overwhelmed. As you said, people get scared, and when I would be very intentional about building awareness, and then I would see other people get kind of confused or weirded out or fearful, and then I would start to get fearful, and I was like, oh no, I'm back in the cycle. And it's been really challenging to I mean, I'm not trying to explain it to anyone, but it's really important to have spaces like these where you can talk about these types of experiences, because it's transformed my life. I mean, and it's very hard to explain to people casually, and but it's also feels like the most important thing that we should all be talking about all the time. We should all be supporting each other through. And like the world, if we had those types of spaces more readily available, or we were all more comfortable at having those conversations, I feel like, a sense of community and sense of friendship, sense of ease and joy, like it could continue to foster and exponentially breed through society and civilization. And so I think it's I really admire what you're both doing with the podcast. And I've always admired all of Corinne's projects, but this in particular, I think, is really an incredible prompt and in podcasts. And so I think that the space is really important.
Well, and to expand upon, what you're talking about as far as, having those spaces, being from an art background, from the music industry, what you're doing to cultivate a new space for artists, that's huge right now, because I think the arts used to have that. I mean, that used to be the escape, right? I mean, how many times you hear the, age-old story about an artist, the outcast artist who has to go find, my share in that sense of awareness with. And I feel like a lot of those art industries got diluted by sales, by, expectations, by push in fashion. Jesus, man, how hard is it to constantly push to beat the next person? And now you're all you're doing is you're playing a game of getting to the highest spot of fashion before the other person. But are you really creating from that artistic space that inspired you to do it in the first place? And I'm experiencing that very same thing with music. So I commend you for having that endeavor to to bring that kind of a space back into art, and to make that I don't know, is there a goal in mind, but more like a concept, or like you said, a space where this can just be cultivated, this art can be cultivated.
Yeah, I think it's something I've, as I'm becoming increasingly aware about people who are intentionally creating space, like the Ivy House is a great example, that just, again, changed my life. Like it transformed my day-to-day experience in such a profound way that I'm so grateful for that space, and the space being cultivated by Corinne and Colleen. And I think with art and with artists, I just have so much respect and admiration for everything that creatives are doing, and that they are taking time out of their day and they're devoting themselves to this craft of sorts, and they're cultivating creativity, and they're cultivating, a new perspective on the world. Like I have this whole idea in my head about it being like a pinhole camera, and I feel like everyone has, their one little pin that's exposing the paper, but when you experience art in a profound way, it's like someone pokes another hole in your pinhole camera, and you get more illumination on your paper, and all of a sudden you're seeing new perspectives of what was outside of that pinhole camera that's coming through. And so I've experienced it firsthand, being able to connect with artists, and also just being an artist and being a creative person, and I think it's very valuable to really embrace that and to celebrate those people that have, again, made a commitment to adding beauty to the world, or transforming or interpreting beauty, in some sense. And a lot of people, I think, have been, shamed away from being creative. Like a lot of people have had the same experience I had, frankly, where growing up, people said it's not a good idea to be an artist. Like, good luck being an artist. And a lot of artists get taken advantage of, and it just feels really counterintuitive, considering that the value add that they have for our experience of the world, and our experience of the world with one another. And so I just feel, very motivated and keen to find a way to ensure that there is more empowerment of people that are celebrating the world through a creative perspective, and trying to start with art, but also thinking about how it could transform into food and fashion and screenwriters and musicians, to your point, and just help people see the source of where that's coming from, or in respect the fact that person is like a servant of creativity in some sense, or is the one that's putting the energy in, because it's hard work, it's not easy to make things, but they're putting the energy in to really bring it to life and to facilitate it in some sense. So that's fundamentally what I believe in the most, and feel the most impassioned by.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, go ahead, Sean. Did you have?
Oh, sorry, I loved what you said about, creatives are, servant to the creative process. I had to point at that, because I think that's the mechanism as to why artists get taken advantage of, is because, somebody who connects with that relationship with the creative process, they don't have a choice. They have to create, and so anytime you take it, that you're exploiting their incredibly beautiful relationship with the creative process as a weakness, and you're using that against them, all over the place. This happens. Every landscape that art is created, artists are being taken advantage because they can't help but create. It is a part of their being. It is that it's a servant to the muse, man. I mean, that is right on. And I think anything we can do to help alleviate some of that that process of taking advantage of is a beautiful thing. So yeah, man, that's a huge mantra. Go for it. I love it.
And I think, to be more even expansive. Sorry, I think to be more expansive about it is that creating space in all aspects of your life, and also living life in general creatively, not just putting it in the box of an artist. Not that any artist is in a box, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, that's what I want to make sure that we can relay to our listeners, is that, you've got the atom, if you remember in grade 11, biology, that the proton nucleus, in the atom, and there's more empty space in that atom than there is matter. And so that's the nature of the universe, is space. And so, when we have, our lives are so cluttered and busy, and our minds are so cluttered and busy, then that creates a life that's so cluttered and busy. It creates even creativity and the way to get it out, and then your life. And so so we have to start internally, the more space we create in ourselves, in our bodies, in our mind, in our breath, in our relationships, as you have put already, Kendall, then that then translates into the space that and create more creative we can live our lives. And I wanted to make one point that, some people think, well, when I have more space, the reason why most people want to fill their space is because they're uncomfortable with when they sit, what's there. And so that's really the first step, is to sit and know what's there and get comfortable with it, because it's always there anyway, and it's gnawing at you and causing you anxiety. You're just not paying attention to it. You're pushing it away. So that's one thing that I just wanted to make clear, maybe for our listeners, that came to me is that, we do eventually have to sit, that something, whatever's happening in your body or your mind with anxiety, or what's happening in your body, it's something that's not right. When you sit with it, you can listen to your intuition, and that is living creatively. That's that's taking charge of your own unique space in this world, and finding your own space, finding your own way. So yeah, I just want to share that. So thank you for sharing your journey of space and creativity and creation and transformation.
Of course. Yeah. It's been a wild ride. So I'm just really in awe of what's happening in our lives, and really grateful to be a part of the journey. So I think it's important to talk about that gratitude, and to remind ourselves, to Corinne's point, to keep the space, and to cultivate it, and to remind ourselves that we are space, that we are the stars, and we already are it all. So we just remember that, and be with it, and see the beauty in it.
And the last thing I want to ask you, is there any books that you're reading that you can recommend that have helped you along the journey at all?
Well, the most memorable one was the Jen McKenna book, I have to say, that Colleen gave me.
Man, that's hardcore.
I just read, I was like, slice right through it. But just read The Theory of Everything, his last one outside of the trilogy. And I always read his books in like 2 days. So I know I'm pretty into them when I read it that fast. But I also just read a book called Searching for the Stars on an Island in Maine. And that's I've gotten a little more interested in quantum physics and studying how, I don't know, science works and stuff, and or how we think science works. And this book is by the physicist who talks about the relationships between the absolutes and science and religion and science. And, it's just kind of an opposite from the Jed vibe. But it was a really great book to just ponder through and imagine as you go. And I think he wrote the whole thing as he was just looking at the stars on an island in Maine. So it has a really great cadence to it that it was a beautiful, beautiful read. So I would recommend that one. And yeah, I think those are the two that have really stuck with me. And I loved Adia's books. Like, I think he's a great writer. And I kind of fell into this whole bucket of, again, being a quote unquote seeker. And I remember when I was at Dawn and Patty's once, and someone asked me what my name was, and I said, oh, my name's Kendall. And they're like, oh, great. Like, it has kind of like Kendall Jenner, if that helps you remember the name. And he's like, who's Kendall Jenner?
Yeah.
And I was like, huh? And I'm there. And then he was like, talking about Adi Shanti. And I was like, who's Adi Shanti? And he had the same thing. He's like, huh? And I was like, oh my gosh, there's this whole world here. And I'm so excited to be in it. And I have so much to learn. And I want to keep going, and keep reading from some of the greats. So yeah, books have played a really important role in the journey as well.
Hell yeah, man. Well, I really, really appreciate your passion and your drive and your excitement for being in this new space. And I say new space because it's 18 months. That isn't really new, but it also is new, and it's hard to put time, constraints on all that. But I appreciate that you're diving in and really going for it. That takes a lot of boldness. So it's not easy to self-reflect and have that much accountability and really saturate your experience with that much. So I commend you for that. It is a hard process, and you're in it, man. So just keep in it and just keep staying in that flow. I appreciate you sharing all that, the stories.
Thank you.
Chaos, and hey, man, go be with the trees. You said trees times before the podcast. So go be with the trees.
I'm obsessed with trees now. It's all I see, and so I just can't stop looking at them. I feel like I'm like touching them and talking to them, and it's magical. So
Yeah.
I love that. Thanks, Kendall. Thanks for sharing your journey and your part, and it'll be an inspiration to many who will listen. So thank you so much.
thank you both. It's really great to be here, and I appreciate you taking the time and holding the space.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. Till next time. Hello, welcome to the Say More section of the Kendall Warson podcast that we just did. Man, she is full of life, full of energy, and full of passion from having, kind of this waking up experience of, like she said, it's like the first time she spoke or saw a tree ever in her life, which is amazing. I love that. I love that perspective, and, kind of how she, kind of just fell into this through a series of somewhat traumatic experiences. So
do you know one of my favorite things, and I didn't bring this up in the interview, but what stuck out to my mind? Well, first of all, because I know her family, and they're all like, one of the uncles is her uncle is a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
And, her mother was one of the highest paid executives in America. And her aunt is a, research scientist, surgeon, and, it's this very high achieving family. But I loved that when she wanted to go to her first art camp when she was like 9 or something, she created a PowerPoint presentation for her parents.
Yeah.
She like walked right over that to convince them to let her go to this art camp.
Yeah, it really painted the picture for the hoops that she had to jump through to go after that, and I think that, like she said, I think that was the start of that map, but that was also the map was built out of that. I don't want to say rigidity, because I think that's there's nothing wrong with having a very focused and accomplished way of moving through life. Of course, the problem is not that that's the mechanism. The problem is that that's it's defective to her being. It's not in line with her being, and I think that's what people. It's interesting how different people operate in life, and like we talk about, empathy, and empathy is a good thing, right? But it can become imbalanced, and that's kind of what she started out with was this, very focused, very success object oriented way of moving through life, and her expectation was that it was going to serve her once she accomplished all those things. And then all of a sudden, the castle kind of falls apart when you achieve all those things, and you realize you weren't really being in all that. You were just doing all of those things and participating, but not from a very aware state of mind. And so it is an interesting, way to start your adventure of life PowerPoint presentation, to go to an art college or, art. I guess it was an art camp. Yeah, that is funny.
She ended up going to art college as well, but it was like when she was 10 or 12 that she went to the art camp that she had to create the PowerPoint presentation to convince her parents to let her go. So yeah, I mean, and I just I love how different all of our podcasts are, and I love the different age that we've got an age range now from I think our youngest. I think she's our youngest so far. She's 25 because Erin's 28. Her cousin is 28. So 25 is our youngest, and then Don is probably our oldest in his 70s. You know, and so I love the variety of Turning Points guests and that we've had on, and you know the fact that hers has been an 18-month journey, like that's kind of when your jaw dropped that it was only 18 months ago that Colleen invited her. I remember, you know, she was going through a transition and looking for a change, and her aunt invited her to Ivy House, and you know Colleen knew she wanted to bring her out to well-being right away. And me, because Don and Patty, you're like, they're amazing, and yet to me that's really jumping in the deep end. It's like somebody starting with Adi Ashanti. It's like, you know, to me I'd be a little bit more of a, you know, dipping your toe in the water to but obviously Kendall was ready for it, and ready and open to what they had to say, and like she said, just sat with it. Like I loved where the conversation went from being lost to having somebody with a lifeline to being willing to go, sitting in it, sitting in the discomfort, to being thirsty for the knowledge, and then creating that space to allow an unfolding of her own nature and a new life to unfold.
Yeah, man, and that's it takes a lot of courage, I think, to invite that, and you know that's something I recognize I haven't had on my journey is courage to, you know, when I've had these profound experiences, being willing to be that passionate and that excited about it. It takes a lot of courage. You know, I would tend to, you know, cower to that and be like, well, this is true for me, but it's not true for them. So I'm not going to be, you know, excited about this or passionate about it because, you know, they might be uncomfortable with it. You know, that's the dysfunctional empath in me, you know, and I think she was recognizing some of the potentially dysfunctional business-minded, you know, things that she was doing. Is it's very easy to bring those things back into your life from a dysfunctional point of view, but you know, the practice that she has that keeps her, you know, in the being of that relationship and saying, okay, well, I'm doing this again, or I'm doing that. And that's the awareness. That is inviting that newfound presence, that newfound space, that newfound awareness into your everyday. And that's kind of what we were talking about on earlier today. We did the live about discerning, is that relationship between, okay, I'm doing this again. Is it serving me? Is this something that is in line with the guidance? You know, am I just adhering to an old program? Am I a slave to that old program? Or am I using part of my nature, which was always there, you know, and am I just, how is that relationship developing? And she sounds like she's on that, in that mechanism of trying to, you know, discern what is her, what is programming. And that's awesome, man. It's very encouraging to hear.
Yeah. And I loved how she then went to the importance of, or the working with the body, like listening to the body. In fact, I got a text from my niece because we were talking about the discerning, you know, what was it? I said, okay, so we're talking on Facebook. And I also felt like we talked about this the whole time with Erin, is discerning between doing what you're guided to do on a daily basis versus what your inner programming says you should do.
Yeah.
And so starting that process of distinguishing that by listening to the body, even with food. Yeah. So starting with food, because to me, that's pretty simple, to listen to the body, what it's drawn to. I mean, we do have cravings, and there are, sometimes we crave, you know, ice cream, and it's not so good for us, but that's also just listening to, am I craving this because I'm bored or because I'm sad about something? Or do I just want to enjoy a small bowl of ice cream?
Yeah.
You know, that's what we're talking about, creating space to listen, to discern these things. So with food, am I drawn to eat this because I I have a sugar craving or I have a carb craving, or is it what my body really needs right now?
Yes.
So starting with that. And when we create space in our life through meditation or exercise or listening more than talking, having quiet time, however more we create space in our lives, then we can really tune in and listen to our body and then our conversations with people, all that. So I loved how that conversation went in that direction as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And she laid out very I think what you would consider mundane and small practices, but that's the practice. She's like, I'll be in a meeting and I'll just drop into my body and I'll just pay attention and feel, in my body what's going on. And I mean, those are the incremental steps that breed a lot of change long term. And it will guide you more into that space, and it will expand that space. And I just don't know that there's another secret weapon besides that, and is inviting that awareness into every moment of every day and to every decision. And it's not to say that you're never going to eat that bowl of ice cream, or that you're never going to, not have that cheeseburger, or that you're not going to just be lazy for a day, because those things are all negative or bad because we're programmed to think they're bad. They're so bad that we want them way more because they're bad, and it's like the being lazy or whatever. It's like, well, did you just work 60, 70, 80 hours a week for X amount of weeks? Is it really a negative to take a day and just lounge? That could be a very healthy thing if that's what your body's calling you to do, So I think even letting go of the stigma behind what it is you're guiding to, that's another layer of that process. And that's why you really got to listen. You got to be in tune and develop that relationship with your body, develop that relationship with your emotions, develop that relationship with the way you intellectualize things. And it is a long process of very small tests, so to speak. You ask a question, you get information back from your body. You try this, it doesn't work, and you just keep crafting this, this relationship to the point where you just, I think, feel more your true nature in every moment of every day, in every interaction.
Yep. It's that. I think we talked about it on last week's podcast, or the same more, is that compounding interest. Anything you do a little bit every day of, you will get better at it and will grow, just like compounding interest grows. So every day you listen, maybe you start by listening to your body with food, maybe just for breakfast, and see how you feel and how that does for you. And then the next couple weeks, okay, breakfast and lunch, and then you, in a business meeting, you add it incrementally. Just listening in general, and just add. And what I love about meditation is that when you're meditating regularly, these things start to happen naturally.
Yes.
I was talking with a friend of mine on the phone just the other day, and we both longtime Chopra people. We met over 20 years ago. Met Deepak and have been practicing meditation. We both teach meditation. And what I've come to realize, because I really didn't know a whole lot about mindfulness, what mindfulness is and mindfulness practice, until I really, talked to Sarah about it, because she teaches meditation and mindfulness. And so I learned more about what mindfulness is. But what I learned is that when you meditate, a byproduct of meditation is mindfulness.
Yeah. Yes.
So the definition of mindfulness is to be consciously aware in each moment. So instead of habitually brushing your teeth or putting the dishes away or being in the shower, I've talked about several times, and thinking about 10 or 20 different things while you're showering, instead of actually the water coming down and how it feels to, everything. To be mindful is to be present in the shower, to be present when you're brushing your teeth, not thinking about where you're going to go, to be present when you're driving, not thinking about the destination, what you're going to buy, or who is really notice everything. And that's what it means to be mindful, to be consciously aware in the moment. So you can do that. You can just start practicing that, which is hard, but it can be done. Or you can meditate every day, and a natural byproduct of that is mindfulness, to be more mindful in your life.
Yeah, because I think what also can happen in that, the early stages of that mindfulness practice is, you say, oh, I'm doing mindfulness. And it's like, well, mindfulness is happening, and I think that's when you meditate, you're inviting a space for mindfulness to happen. Whereas when you are in a state of thoughtfulness, you're constantly thinking, you're shutting off that space for mindfulness to happen. But we want to get good at doing mindfulness, right? I want to be good at being mindfulness. It's like, well, that's the funny thing, and that's where that kind of paradoxical nature happens, which is you aren't doing mindfulness. You are creating an absent space and inviting mindfulness into your presence, into your awareness. But you're not, it's a funny thing that you're not doing, but it is happening, and that's, I think it's one thing where you can intellectualize mindfulness a lot better than you can actually have mindfulness does that make sense? I don't know if that's where the paradox gets tricky, but.
Yeah. I mean, you can intellectualize anything.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we do. That's the beauty of being a human being, is that we have this thinking capability of thinking. Like, there isn't anything we don't do on a daily basis that wasn't started in the mind of somebody great, somebody's great mind, great thinking.
Yeah.
But the problem is that we have made our thoughts and our mind our God, really. And we worship and believe everything that roommate in our mind is saying.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's just thoughts like clouds in the sky,
Yeah.
that come and go. And I say that all the time. And I don't know if this is something I tell my students. I may have said it on the Say More section before, but it's like using a hammer. I know you've heard me say this a million times. It's like there's nothing better than hammering a nail than a hammer. If you've ever tried to hammer a nail with a screwdriver, which I've done, or a knife when I couldn't find a hammer, like, there's nothing better to hammer a nail than a hammer, right? But you can't build an entire house with a hammer.
Yes.
It doesn't work. So the mind, there's nothing better to understand things intellectually, to figure out math problems, to plan a vacation, to do your banking, to, all the things, many things that we do, our toolbox mind that we need to do. But we can't use our mind and our thoughts for everything.
Yeah.
In fact, we only really need our toolbox mind for about 15% of what we do in a day. And the other 85% is just rethinking things over and over, judging things, contemplating things. It's that incessant roommate in the head. Yeah.
No, that's a good point. And there's so many examples of that I can think of just right off the bat of, like, I have a job, and while I'm doing my job, it doesn't require that much. It requires more focus on just doing a very one-dimensional task in a lot of times. You're doing this task, and then you're doing this task, and you're doing this task. Our minds want to do the task, anticipate the next task, and then try to project what might even come then, and then it wants to have the whole job finished before you actually do the job, and that's what the mind is doing, all that extraneous stuff. And same thing with, as being a parent, man, I can think of so many times where it's like, yeah, I'm with my kids in the room, but I'm not just being with them. I'm thinking about what I got to do tomorrow, or I'm thinking about, there's so much time of the day where it's like, I'm just supposed to be eating food with these people, and I'm not doing that. I'm spending way more mental energy contemplating things that aren't real right now, and yeah, there's very little, and I'm sure it's different for everybody to a certain degree, but there's not a lot of different things I have to do with my mind. It's really, if you think about it, this is the task. Focus on the task, do the task. That's going to take mental power. And then, hey, another task comes up. Do the task, some mental power. But staying in that seems to bring more clarity to work, much more. You're decompressed after work because you're not holding on to all the tasks that you did. You're not projecting all the tasks you got to do. Just stay in the task when it's the time to do the task and let go of the task when you're not doing the task anymore. Everything else is so much repetition, you know. And I going back to Erin's, Erin Brophy's podcast that we did, her and I talked. It's like I had an hour and a half conversation with somebody in my head that if I actually had the conversation with somebody would take about 2 minutes, It's like, but I spent an hour and a half having a conversation that would never actually come into fruition. And that happens so many different times on so many different levels. And that is the extraneous, that is the minutia, that is the things, those are the things that are just the clouds that you're chasing after, and not letting go. You're just let the cloud go, man.
It's called an undisciplined mind.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's what most people have, is an undisciplined mind.
Yeah.
And I remember I was dating this guy, Jack, in San Diego years ago. And, it was when we first started dating. So I was working at the Chopra Center at the time. And so when he'd call me on my cell phone at work, I would walk outside and I'd walk around the flowers and I'd take a 5 or 10 minute walk while I talked to him anytime he called me at work, which is at least once a day he would call me. And then after we'd been dating about 6 months, when it wasn't as new and special, he would call me, and I didn't notice this until he pointed it out. And I would I would sit at my desk and I would even type a little bit, but it wasn't even so much the typing he could hear me, but he could tell that I was a little distracted.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Are you sitting at your desk still?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you used to go out for a walk."
Yeah.
And that's what happens is we think, when and another time, one of my teachers called me a few years ago to discuss a trip we were going to take and teach together. And I remember when he called me, I stopped on the side of the road to talk to him. Like I didn't even want to drive and talk, which I do all the time to people. I'll call them on my mom on my cell phone or whatever. And it's like, we do so much multitasking. And now in the business world, there's a thing called monotasking.
Yeah. Yeah. Because are you really having the conversation when you're also doing something else? And
you're not fully present and listening to the nuances. And that's what I find with coaching, why, I can multitask like the best of them, but I also, know the importance of mindfulness and being present. And so I work on it on a daily basis. And my coaching helps me with that. It's like, because I focus completely on my client when I'm talking to them on the phone or in person, like I'm listening to and the things that I can pick up when I'm fully present, listening to them, the nuances of what they say and the inflections and the details and the intuition that I can come out with is far greater. So I could do that when I'm talking to anybody, and so that's what I've learned to do that now. I'm like, well, if I'm doing that with them, then I should be doing that with my mom or whatever it is, or my dad when he was alive,
Yeah. And I, not because it's so bad to multitask, but because if you are multitasking, you are allowing the unaware part of your mind to do the task. So you're almost certainly going to answer questions from programming instead of actually hearing what they said. Exactly. And inviting the answer out. You're mostly doing tasks from programming, and then that compounds on itself. The more you multitask, and it's not that you're not being successful. Okay, you're a successful multitasker, but where's the awareness? Where's the presence? And I think we need to invite more present responding versus programmed reactions to how we interact with each other.
Yes.
And that's that is exactly what it sounds like Kendall realized was happening in her life. And it was like she said, she's like, I felt like I had never actually even seen a tree in my life. And now she's looking at all the trees. She's like, now all I see is trees. And I love that, man. It's like, beautiful, pay attention, be aware, and be present. So
that's why people love nature so much.
Yeah.
People, I've several friends that are like, they're only happy in nature. And that's cool. I mean, nature is amazing, that they're relying on nature to bring them present.
Yes. Yes.
You can have that appreciation for life and that awe for life in the city too.
Yes. Yes.
Because ultimately that spaciousness is within you, that awareness is within you.
Yeah.
What you feel in nature and what you experience in nature is a reflection of the stillness and awareness and the vastness within you.
Yeah. And that awareness is not contingent on a location
It's not.
or an environment
Or a person.
or a person. Yeah.
And that's a tough one to get for people. And you can't get it intellectually. You cannot get it intellectually, because I understood that intellectually for many, many years until I fully embodied it.
Yeah.
And now I swear I can appreciate being on the beach, because I really love being around water and in the beach, one of my favorite things to do. And I can really appreciate that, when I go home to Canada and see my family on my brother's boat. It's beautiful being on the lake. And I'm be in Mexico next week. But honestly, I'm just as happy sitting here at the Ivy House or gardening or going to the grocery store and connecting with somebody. Like, I'm pretty freaking blissful at all times in all circumstances. The only thing I won't say the only thing, because that's kind of arrogant, but one of the many things I'm working on is a pure acceptance when my body is uncomfortable, like physical pain or physical discomfort. Like,
Yeah.
I'm way better than I used to be, but that's, I can be uncomfortable in uncomfortable emotional situations. I'm pretty darn comfortable with now. I'm just okay with accepting emotions and difficult situations. But when the body is sick or in pain, that's the little tweaky thing I can be happy. And I've been discussing this recently with one of my clients who actually has an incredibly hard time not getting completely depressed when her body's not well.
Yeah.
Now, I don't go there. I don't get depressed at all. It doesn't mess with my happiness or my peace of mind when my body is ill or uncomfortable at all. And so I don't know what the problem is, but I feel like I just want to create even more space. Oh, well, I don't know.
That's the thing. It's like, it's a practice, and but just having an awareness on that practice of, the physical discomfort and your emotional state or your mental state while you're in that, just inviting that awareness into that relationship, should give you clarity on where the dysfunction is happening, and that's all. That's the process. That's just do that over and over and over again, and eventually there's a constant clarity and a constant relationship with that space, and an appreciation and a humble gratitude towards mindfulness as it kind of permeates all those spaces.
Yeah.
Fun ride, man.
It is. And I appreciate you so much. Enjoy the rest of your time with your family in Florida.
Yes, I will. It's been fun. I've been really taking in and just having great conversations down memory lane with my grandparents, who I don't often get to see, and hearing the stories and how they were and what they were going through, and it's great. It's been really enjoyable. So I appreciate it. Thanks. It's going to be a good.
All right. And I'll talk to you next week from Mexico.
Oh, good. I can't even say I'm jealous because I'm in South Florida. So, enjoy your trip, and I will see you same time somewhere.
Same time, same station. Subscribe, people. Make sure you subscribe.
All right. Have a great night. I love you.
Love you.